Hey HannahMouse1 here. It's that time of year again. Time for another Fireside Game Jam run by Helper Wesley. I love these jams, it's a great little community, and obviously I'm keeping things on brand by making my entry in Scratch, so here we go. The theme of this jam was expand, which gave me a couple of ideas. My initial instinct was to make some sort of city builder or something where you expand your empire or whatever, but I just made a type of city builder for the recent WoW Games Game Jam, so I decided to not go with that idea. I decided that I wanted to make a platformer because I haven't made one in ages, and to keep it to the brief, I decided that I would incorporate some sort of mechanic where you expand your play space by lifting a fog that blocks some areas by completing short missions. But initially I just had to get a basic platformer engine up and running. I threw in some coloured block placeholder art and just mocked up the movement script. I did this in a custom block so it all runs in a single frame, and I actually made this a bit more advanced than any other platformer that I've personally made in Scratch by incorporating Coyote time, which is where your character still jumps if you press the jump button a few frames early or late, because this makes the game feel a lot more responsive and makes for a subtly better gameplay experience. I also decided to mix things up by using an art style that I've never really used before. It's a hand-drawn pixel art style, and for the player I made a little blue wisp spirit character. I find that having an art style that differentiates key interactable objects, solid but otherwise inert platforms, and background elements really helps with readability. So for background elements I use desaturated colours that blend into the background as though you're seeing them through a layer of fog. Platforms you can collide with are static objects but have bold outlines to make them seem more solid, and interactable objects are constantly moving or jittering, an effect I achieved by drawing 3 near identical costumes for each, so despite them not changing in appearance they still grab your attention, and the most important objects seem to glow a little due to a lighter outline outside of their main bold outline. And yes, this constant jittering effect did almost triple the art style workload, which is a great idea for a time cap game jam project, isn't it? First I just got the initial objective sorted, where the player picks a fire flower and offers it to a statue in order to lift the first few chunks of fog. I had to create run and jump animations for the player and platforms for them to jump on, making sure that the platforms line up chunk to chunk. I also had to make sure that any areas that are still foggy showed that visually, and for this I needed to make sure that the edges of the fog texture could be repeated seamlessly, and I needed separate costumes for the edges of the fog to clean those up, and I needed of course to animate and code in any interactable objects. So for this mission the fire flower and the statue, as well as the UI prompts to indicate what item the statue wants, and the keyboard keys that you need to press to interact with these interactable objects. I kept this first mission really simple, with the 2 interactable objects needed for the task being the only ones you initially have access to, so it's pretty clear what you need to interact with as a form of diegetic tutorial. Kind of like how in the first Mario game they just kind of threw a Goomba at you in order to force the player to learn to jump. In the same vein, the second objective introduces the mechanic of combining items, or more accurately I guess, using items on objects to create new ones. Like in this mission you have to use a fire flower on a water flower to create a steam flower, which is the offering that the statue demands to lift the second set of fog. To get this to work, I not only had to create the art for the new steam flower, but also needed the UI for the key prompts for using items, as well as an inventory. The inventory needed an icon for every item, and remember, in order to maintain that constantly moving look that key objects have, I needed to redraw each one 3 times, so that was fun. And I hope that with this second objective you can kind of see how the game works a bit better. In a lot of ways there's a point and click adventure game element to how this game functions, and the way you have to use logic to determine what items to use where, and I do worry that it might fall into the trap that a lot of point and click games do, where it can be hard to follow the singular line of logic that the creator, me in this case, intended to solve the puzzles, but I guess I'll find that out when people start playing this thing and sending in feedback. But after getting that second mission programmed in, I knuckled down and drew as much of the game's art as I could. I had 2 more missions in my head and I won't tell you about them because I don't want to spoil the solutions, but given these missions I had a pretty good idea of all the things I would need to make them work, and the art was a pretty hefty time sink, especially again with the extra frames needed to maintain that jittery hand-drawn look. But I knew that once I had the art done, the actual coding of the missions would be fairly quick, and I like art, surprise surprise, so it wasn't too painful, even with the deadline sneaking ever closer. I needed to make art for any objects as they appear in the world, with many having multiple states, like plants which can be picked or are ready to be picked, or the campfire which can be lit or extinguished, and I needed to create icons for any collectible items in the inventory and prompt icons for any item that can be requested. And then I got all of these objects appearing in the world, creating platforms for them to appear on, and gave them their required functionality. This was, like I expected, fairly streamlined and didn't take too long to get set up. But again, I won't go too much into this to avoid spoilers. With the missions in place, I created art for the title and end screens, which meant naming my game. I try not to overthink naming game jam games. I called it When the Fog Clears, which was the first thing I came up with that I figured had a decent punch to it. Oh, and by the way, would any of you be interested in me hosting a game jam? Like, let me know, because I'd totally do that. And the final touches of this game, an absolutely key one, sounds. I didn't have enough time to create the music for this game, so I used the same track that I made for The Quarry in A Farmer's Life, and I took sounds from the Scratch library as well as some of my own projects to give everything their necessary effect. And then I got the project onto Itch and submitted the jam. Apart from that, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. Like and subscribe if you did. It lets me know there's something to see more of. Join the Discord, link down below, and I'll see you next week with another video. Bye!